Hey folks, what you see before you is a computer in pieces. This used to be a Sandy Bridge build. It was in this Antec 900 case I got from I think it was a 900 case I got from a buddy of mine a couple years ago. It used to house an Ivy Bridge build, I believe, so I stuck some of my old Sandy Bridge hardware in here. You might remember this from past videos, the SSD falling, yes. The Gigabyte GA-H61M S2PV. I'm a big fan of these boards. I got turned on to them by Max Arcade years ago. He was using these to build all sorts of stuff. And they just seem like really solid, stable boards. And I've had a couple of these. I think I sold one, but I kept this one. And this one currently is a Core i5, 2500K, and 16 gigs of RAM. So, you know, it's a build that's still competent today. And along with that was an AMD R7 370 2GB graphics card, which that's still a pretty damn good card to this day. Just look at the I/O on it. DisplayPort, HDMI, DVI-I, and DVI-D. So you could actually convert this to VGA, which is what I've done for my test monitor, actually. So that's what was in this machine. Now, we're going to upgrade it today because I've been trying to run emulators on this particular build. I was just going to use this as is because a 2500K is still pretty nice. But emulators start having fits with this build, and I've noticed that the USB has started to really get flaky on this board for some reason. Like, it'll randomly reset and shut off and just do stupid stuff. So I don't know if that's an age problem or if Linux just doesn't like some of this older hardware anymore, or what's going on there, but either way, it's aging, and I don't like that. The USB 3, I think there was USB 3 on here. No, there wasn't USB 3 on here. The USB on this board was starting to act up, and that sort of prompted me to just upgrade it, because I just spent money on a new power supply. This is the old one. It's an old 550 watt Antec, which needs to be upgraded because it's 15 years old and it still works. But, yeah, I put money in. The minute I put money into this system, it starts acting up and getting flaky. So I figure I might as well nip in the butt and just upgrade it while it's acting stupid. And I guess I just won't use it for my intended use. So what I was doing was I was testing the Dolphin emulator with some GameCube games. And for some reason that made the CPU unhappy, and it made USB reset and do all this really weird stuff, which it hasn't done on any of my other systems that I've tested it on. So what I intended on doing was making this a computer that I hook into my main TV set, which is a 4K set in the living room. And you know, this hardware probably wouldn't have driven 4K very well, but I was just going to run it at 1080p and call it a day because that TV has a good upscaler. So but this is a bit of a blessing in disguise. This hardware, it's probably still fine, but it's just not liking what I'm trying to do with it. So what I decided to do was upgrade. So we're going to build an upgrade today. Now, I don't make a habit of filming every single thing I do with a computer these days because, let's face it, if you change out a RAM stick or a hard drive, it's just not that interesting. So this is something that I think is actually kind of exciting and kind of neat. So what I did when I went forward this build is what I could get the best for the money by going to Micro Center today and coming back with it. And I walked away with a CPU and a motherboard, and I swiped the RAM from another build, which is pretty slow RAM, but it will do the job, and I have a spare graphics card that I'm going to use in this build as well. I think it's going to be a pretty nice build for a living room PC. That's going to run most of the time emulators, but maybe some bigger deal games as well, if I feel that if I really want to play them on a TV. So we'll see about that. But anyway, this is the old hardware, and this is the new hardware. And why don't we put this off to the side and dig into the new hardware? Now, what I'm going to do with this computer here is I'm probably just going to stick it in another case. Probably not worth a video, because it's just not interesting. I'm just going to shove it in another case and use it as a spare machine. The graphics card, I have no idea what I'm going to do with that, but I'll see that it gets stored safely if I don't put it somewhere else. So, yeah, there you have it. Let's get on to the build, shall we? Okay, so now I have the new board and the other graphics card laid out. I don't think I told you what board this was. It's a Gigabyte H310M A2.0. So it's a classic Gigabyte ultra durable motherboard. It's kind of a like for like. You know, this is the old board here. We're basically replacing it with a newer version of the same thing. Yeah, it's basically the same board except that it doesn't have PCI slots. So it's kind of a like for like replacement, which is kind of cool. And why don't we take a look at this board here. So it's a nice, sexy black PCB. Gigabyte did a good job with the color scheme. The SATA ports are in a weird location. I usually find them down here, but up there isn't the worst because sometimes sometimes you mount your drives a little bit higher up and you can use the extra length with it being up in the middle of the board like that. USB 3 header on board, of course. It still has a serial port header on it, which I like. It has TPM there. Front USB 2.0, of course. You get your X16 slot, you get 2 X1 slots, and my favorite, you get an M.2 slot, which I'm going to utilize. The SSD I was using in this computer has actually been in an M.2 SATA SSD adapter, which just converts it down to the 2.5-inch form factor. I'm just going to take it out of this adapter and shove it in the machine, because that will be a much, much better solution, in my opinion. It uses your typical 12 volt. Uses your typical main power connector there. It only has a 4-pin CPU power connector, though. So I wouldn't be doing anything crazy power hungry with this computer, which I don't plan on doing. And the I/O, it still has PS2, which makes me very happy to see that port has not died off. The video I/O on this board's pretty nice. DisplayPort and HDMI, so you can convert DisplayPort to just about anything, so that's nice to have. And HDMI is good for TVs. USB 2.0 and some USB 3.0 here with USB-C, which is a nice touch. So you got some more USB and some Ethernet and some audio. So, you know, nothing too fancy. It will definitely get the job done. And, you know, I'm a no-frills kind of guy with computer builds, so no RGB, none of that crap. This is just going to be a TV that sits next to a TV. It's going to be a build that sits next to the TV. Jeez, I am just stumbling over my words today. And this is the CPU this build's going to be based around. Now, I did not pay $200 for this CPU. It was knocked down to about $120. And with the motherboard bundle, I got a $20 discount. So, in effect, this was basically a $100 processor. And this is a Core i5-9400F. And what the F designates is that there's no onboard video, which generally makes these cost less. And with the needs that I have for this computer, I'm never going to use the onboard video, so I got one without. It's a 6-core chip with no hyperthreading, so it's plenty for what I need. And yeah, there you have it. I haven't built an Intel system since Kaby Lake was new, so it's been a little while. It's been at least 3 years, something like that, so yeah. I mean, this was literally the cheapest option in the store. The AMD stuff was actually more expensive and not a good value for money compared to what was in stock. So I just got whatever was in stock and good for the money. Because obviously we're in the middle of human malware at the moment. So, stock is just not good right now. But this is a 6-core chip. It's an upgrade from the quad-core in this machine. So, you know, it's going to be a huge upgrade. This is 2011 hardware. This is 2019 hardware. It's still an upgrade. It doesn't really matter that I didn't go AMD. I still got an upgrade out of it, and it's still good for the money. So we're going to build a nice system with this. So let me stick the parts in the board, and we'll get back to ya. Okay, I have all the things mounted on the motherboard. I got the CPU in there. I've got this Dynatron tower cooler in there. Got a 128 gig, I think it's a Micron SSD? No, it's a Lite-On SSD. It's a 128 gig Lite-On SSD in the M.2 slot. And I've got the Evo Forza RAM in here. And look at these heat sinks. They get right in the way of the fan. But luckily there's holes in the heat sink, so it's really not going to matter that much. But it just looks obnoxious. It's not really going to affect how the processor is cooled, I don't think, because this heatsink's already overkill for the chip anyway. I mean, look how small the regular heatsink is. It's not even that thick. This thing is gigantic, so it'll be just fine. I used this cooler on a Haswell system before, and now it's being used on Coffee Lake Refresh. So, yeah, there you go. So I'm going to shove this in the case, put the graphics card in, plug all the connectors that need to be plugged in into the board, and then I will find a way to hook it up, and we will take a look at it. Well, I've run into my first snag that I didn't even think of. So, cooler, RAM. Cooler budging up against the RAM and making it not quite straight. Oh my god, these heatsinks, obnoxious heatsinks on a RAM are the worst. So, I think I'm going to have to put 8 gigs in this instead of 16. So, damn it. Oh, whatever. 8 gigs will run the machine for what I want to use it for the time being. So I'm just not going to worry about it. I'll just put better RAM in it later. So let me grab some different RAM and we'll come back. Wow, so I got regular RAM, regular boring RAM, and it still touches. Wow, this board was not made to have fancy coolers on it at all. So when I get better RAM for this, I'm going to have to get RAM that's just plain Jane boring. Because this is pretty plain Jane boring RAM anyway. It's some gold key RAM I got off eBay. Really cheap. So, 8 gigs of RAM. It'll be fine for now. It'll get 16 later, more than likely. So, there you have it. In case you're wondering what the RAM was, it's DDR4 2400. So, it's, you know, it's just enough for this chip. Okay, so I managed to get that RAM snag to not be an issue anymore. I changed this fan out because the connector on the old one was so loose it wouldn't stay in the port on the motherboard. So I had to go dig an old fan out that uses a Molex connector and attach it to this absolute daisy chain of filth. This cable management's going to be a mess no matter what, because this power supply just is spaghetti. It's been spaghetti for 15 years, and it will be until I change it out. And as it turns out, I'm going to have to wait until I change this out to put in a certain part, that being the graphics card. The RX 580 here uses an 8-pin connector, and this power supply is so old that it only gives you a 6-pin. So, for the time being, I'm going to use the R7 370. It'll work, but I won't be able to use what I want to use in this build, and that's sort of been a theme. Just bad luck with that. So I'm going to stick that in there, and we'll give this thing a test with that particular card, which is actually nice, because I'll just be able to use my test monitor to get this thing up and working. So yeah, there you have it. I got to tie this cable off because it's just kind of in the way, and it's just going to get stuck in that fan up there. So that's something I see, and yeah. I'll button this up and we'll give it a test and see what the BIOS looks like. Well, would you look at that? This card actually looks pretty nice in here. This card, when I get the right power supply, is going to really get into the spaghetti mess there and push it. So I'm hoping the new power supply has less spaghetti in general. This one's always been a mess, as I've said before, so that will resolve itself. But this build will run with this graphics card and this power supply, so I'll at least be able to show it to you. It's really not worth part of a video just to put the other video card back in here and show you it turning on and all that stuff. It's just not that interesting, because this is a build that's primarily going to be used for emulation, but it may be used for a little more than that. And that's why I'm sticking that particular graphics card in. But this graphics card will run the emulation stuff just fine. So it's not like what I'm going to show you is going to change at any point. So yeah, looks pretty spaghetti over here and pretty neat over here. So plug this in, see if she works. Okay, I've got it plugged into this tiny little Acer monitor. I've got the tower under here. So let's give this thing a look-see. That's what the Gigabyte boards do. They'll boot like that. So let's go to... Look at that. The Ultra Durable logo is the same as my old board. So, there you go. Wow, that date's wrong up there. Anyway, here's the BIOS. It looks pretty simplistic. There you go. Memory's at 2400 megahertz like it's supposed to be. Yeah, there you go. 8 gigs of RAM should run all the emulation stuff that I want to do. Let's check the power supply voltages on that ancient power supply. They look to all be within tolerance. So that's good. 3.3 volts within tolerance, and the 12 volt rail's definitely in tolerance, and the 5 volt rail's basically right on. I forget what the plus or minus is. It's some percentage. It's been a while. 3D Mark 01 enhancement. What year is it? My God, man. Okay, so it's got fan curves and stuff, which aren't being used because every fan is just power right now. Alright, the first thing it wants to boot from is the Western Digital hard drive, and that's wrong. So we want to boot. Light on SSD should be the first thing to boot. Well, UEFI is the first thing to boot on there. It sees it though, light on 128 gig SSD. Everything seems to look good. Oh, look at this. SW guard extensions, Ethernet, trusted computing. Turn that off because I don't use it. You can turn the serial port on and off in case it causes problems. UEFI network stack. You can do NVMe stuff on here. HCI, that's good. Very cool. So it's a very functional BIOS. They actually had VTD enabled. How about that? Very nice. Usually they turn that off in BIOSes, but in this one they left it on. CEC 2019 ready. Yeah, that's probably some power management stuff. Anyway, let's see if this boots into an operating system. This monitor is horrible, by the way. It's a really, really washed out TN panel. But it's a good test monitor. Hey, there we go. So let's log into this machine right here. Ooh, that was nice and quick. I have a pretty basic install of Manjaro on here, which is a distro I've started using lately, which I need to make a video about that if I haven't already. I don't think I have. I have it set up in a certain way, so ksys. Oh yeah, look at that. Oh yeah. Get your 6 cores right there. Well, let me open something better than that. Let me open up the info center itself. Here we go. Well, there you have it. It is running the Core i5-9400F, 6 cores, 8 gigs of RAM. Now I think it's time to test and see what happens with the emulation on here, because that's what I was running into problems with. So let's start the Dolphin emulator and try the game I was running, which was 007 Nightfire. As you can see, I have a bunch of games on here, including Tony Hawk. Hell yeah, man. Nightfire. Okay, so I'm doing it the ghetto way. We're gonna point a camera at a screen, but I want you to be able to actually see what happens. So let's start this game. This is the Dolphin emulator with GameCube. Hopefully you can see the FPS in the corner there. Looks like you cannot. Alright. There, now you should be able to. So what this game should do is it should jump between 60 frames and 30 frames depending on what's going on. Most of the FMV sequences are in 30 frames per second. Some of the game sequences that use the game engine will be in 60 frames. And what this was doing before on the Sandy Bridge machine is it was stable for a while, then after I used it for some time, the frame rate started to jump all over the place. And then I ended up getting a very bizarre error message that a thread was going too fast on the CPU. It was really weird. And this was the only system, the system with the Sandy Bridge hardware was the only one that experienced that problem. So it's anybody's guess as to what happened there. But my guess is that CPU security mitigations probably got in the way to some degree or another in the Linux kernel. But anyway. Protect Dominique. I'm sure a lot of you grew up playing this game. Now here's what this emulator does. It stutters like that normally. That's just the emulator. That's not the hardware. If you see the blood there, the blood kind of stutters a little bit too. And there goes your 30 frames a second. And keep in mind, we're not even using the RX 580 yet. We're just using the R7 370 that only has 2 gigs of VRAM. And by the way, I have Dolphin scaled up to 720p for 720p resolution because this is a 1366 by 768 display. And I can already see an improvement in the frame consistency just from upgrading the guts. And not even all of the guts, just the CPU, really. And I have less RAM, too. Anyway, here's the 3D sequences.
Get me closer to the road.
Now, there will be some stutters and glitches and stuff here or there just because that's the way the emulator is, but I'm already seeing an improvement. Ooh, snipey. Yeah, this is already a massive improvement over the other hardware I had. Now, you may be asking yourself why I went with Intel instead of forcing my own hand and going AMD. Well, these emulators they don't really favor core count, they favor high frequency. I'd say the only emulators where core count really matters that much is something like a PS3 emulator, something of that era. Now you see the frame rate dip. You saw it dip at that point, but there really wasn't a big stutter like there was. So these emulators favor high frequency. And Intel seems to do a better job with emulation, which is what this build is mostly going to be used for, but it will also be used for other things. Like with the 6-core processor, I could stream this stuff at the same time, for example, which is something I've wanted to do for a while. And it just gives me a little bit of headroom. See, here's a 30 FPS FMV sequence of the game. And it's holding pretty steady. I think once I put the better graphics card in here, it's going to do slightly better. But that graphics card is mostly to compensate for the fact that this is going to be plugged into a 4K TV eventually. Okay, so here's driving, which looks pretty smooth so far. Keep in mind, this game is from 2002, so... There you go. I can already tell a difference. Like, this is really smooth now. Really, really smooth. It's even smoother than it was on some of the AMD systems that I have that I tested it on. And most of the AMD tests I've done were on first gen Ryzen. That they weren't necessarily on third gen. But third gen Ryzen, I remember having some stuttering issues too. So I don't know why these emulators like Intel so much. That seems a little weird to me. Maybe that they're just optimized for it better. I really don't know. But I've noticed with Dolphin in particular, it tends to like Intel over AMD. Like, when that Sandy Bridge machine was working properly, it performed better than an R3 1200 did with Dolphin. But this is looking really smooth so far. I mean, we're only testing at 720p, but the scaling didn't really change the performance that much, to be honest with you. But so far, I'm seeing pretty smooth action. And one thing I've noticed, I did some more testing with Dolphin, it likes AMD graphics too. So this combination of AMD graphics and Intel CPUs seems to do the best job at this in particular. So that's what I found from my testing so far with the systems that I have. Intel CPU, Emulation really likes Intel CPUs, and AMD, and Dolphin in particular likes AMD GPUs. So that's what we're working with here. Alright, so I'm going to get past this sequence as quickly as I can. If you guys ever played Nightfire when you were kids back in the day, shout out to you guys, because I played so much of this when I was younger. And I don't know if you've been seeing this so far, but if you look at the frames per second in the corner, it seems to be doing a very good job. It's holding very consistent. I think most of the lacking nature of this is probably the graphics card. The graphics card is too old for the system. It just is. The RX 580 will be a much better match because it'll be an 8 gig graphics card. And the other thing too is that Sandy Bridge hardware was stuck at PCIe 2.0. That was a really old platform. This has much more memory bandwidth, much more PCIe bandwidth, everything. So Dolphin will really like this, and I'll have to see if PS3 emulators work well as well, but I'm not at that stage yet. I'm just getting the systems that I care about working, which is mostly stuff from the late 90s and early 2000s, so N64, GameCube, Dreamcast, and even some stuff from before then, like the Genesis. Yeah, Austrian castles, man. So far, this is a lot more consistent than it was. I mean, you see some dips in the frames per second, but there's no stuttering anymore, which is what I was getting on every other system I was testing on, was some weird stuttering, and the only one that actually had a full showstopper was the Sandy Bridge machine. That actually made the hardware itself puke a little bit. Ah, the charm of old games. You can shoot the guy dead and he still talks. So, in combat here, you'll notice that the frame rate is pretty stable. As you can see, I'm playing in easy mode, so I can stare at the FPS counter while I play the game. I'm just going through this as fast as possible, because there's a snowmobile sequence in this game, which is where that CPU problem happened, where it kind of hiccuped because a thread was going too fast or something. It was really weird. Easy fighter shots, easy fighter shots. That's all they say. Oh yeah. Don't touch the red wire. I am such a stealthy man. Look at that. Get past these guards here. I like how they can shout and the other guards just don't do anything. It's great. These old games have such charm. Oh, there was a little bit of a stutter there. Did you see that? Not a bad one, though. That one I would consider more of an emulation problem. Yeah, I'm literally just sort of shotgunning this as fast as possible. No pun intended. Man, the weapons in these old Bond games are so satisfying. They really are. Bye-bye. So here's a scene that uses the game engine, and that's still running at basically 60 frames per second. Oh yeah, I'm Pierce Brosnan, and I look handsome.
The guests won't take kindly to firearms. Keep them hidden to maintain a low profile.
Now, this is just walking around with a bunch of NPCs around. It all seems well.
Enjoy the path.
Recalling audio from the ISO of the game doesn't seem to have a problem. Oh yeah, gotta do this for fun. Oops.
I'm waiting for someone.
Are you now?
Bond heads for the stairs. Drake's about to address his guests in the grand ballroom.
Alright, so walking around in a place like this seems to be fine. No issues whatsoever. The amazing thing is, this isn't even the good graphics card, and it's performing much better already. So it's effectively the same graphics hardware, but with a different platform, and the new platform actually makes all the difference in the world.
Thank you all for accepting my...
Still holding stable. This should be another in-game sequence. James! James!
Bond, don't let Drake's men get in your way. Use whatever means necessary to get to that meeting.
So far, this is performing so well. Like, immediate difference. The advice of the internet was go Intel for emulation, and boy was the internet right. Because even my Ryzen stuff didn't emulate as good as this. What am I doing? Give me that.
Come on, let's get out of here.
Oh yeah. That was not a very well lined up shot, but I tried. I didn't get the gold medal. Okay, Alpine Escape. Here's the third level of the game that had... This is where the CPU choked on the Sandy Bridge machine. So let's see if I can get through this level without it choking. If it chokes, you'll see it. I've got the camera on the screen. Boom! Right through the door.
That one's a nasty bit of business, isn't it? Perfect.
Even these FMV sequences are a little smoother.
Hurry, Zoe. We haven't much time.
Okay, so shooty shooty. Some more shooty shooty. Oh. Okay, the frame dips that I got from shooting those barrels that when they explode didn't happen. So it just appears to be a much more stable system in general. Let me shoot down the cable car there. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Yeah, so what some of these explosions of the barrels would do is they would bog the system down. You'd actually hear the emulator or struggling in the sound. But this is much more consistent, much more stable. Just in that sequence alone. Even that explosion there would make it the frames dip. And I think particle effects push the CPU really hard is my theory behind that. I'm no expert, I'm just an enthusiast like the rest of you, so, you know. Bye-bye Watchtower. There's another in-game sequence. Boom, explosion in the back. I just can't get over how a CPU change has just made this so much better than it was before. Like, night and day difference. But then again, we are talking about hardware that's nearly 10 years apart. Sandy Bridge hardware was from 2011. This hardware that I'm using now is from 2019, basically. 10th gen just came out as I filmed this video, which is, I think, is why I was able to get such a good deal on these parts. For an emulation build, 6 cores is enough. There wasn't much point in waiting for, you know, the 10th gen parts on the i3 level to come out, which is what I would have bought. So this is fine. Like it really doesn't matter that I bought into a dead end platform because I could use this for years and just not have a problem. Now I forget where in this level the Sandy Bridge system choked up and broke. The one thing I didn't mention is when it complained about the thread going too fast, I/O also just completely kicked the bucket for some reason. It's like it reset the USB ports or something. It was kind of weird. Let's try using rockets.
James, they're closing the gate.
They're closing the gate! Oh no! Shoot it then. Bye. Now, would a helicopter really have to fly that low to blow a bridge up?
Hang on tight. We're in for a bumpy ride.
Those of you who are in the military, maybe you can say. If you ever flew a helicopter, let me know. I love this.
Sorry, we forgot to make a reservation.
Phew. Looks like we should have up.
It's not over yet. Back into the woods.
In-game sequences. Oh, yeah. Give me the machine guns. Death to you. Death.
James, in front of us.
Go left.
Goodbye. Whee! Okay, there's another 30 frames per second FMV sequence. So it made it through. It actually made it through this time. Without completely choking the hardware. Now there's another car level here. Let's try that one too and make sure that works. I have a feeling it will, but I just want to give it a shot.
Was this car here the whole night?
Perhaps. But you look like you needed the rest.
I don't recall getting much rest. Have
Yeah, there's some stuttery video again. But that's the emulation, not the hardware. As I have said. Okay, here's another driving sequence, this time with little bit more missiles and activity and things like that. This is extremely smooth. Very smooth, silky smooth even. Gotta use a smoke screen to get rid of the local authorities. Death. Death. Bah. Boom. Boom. Oh, jeez. Guy actually screwed me up driving there. Now, I'm seeing frames dip into the 40s here, but I think some of that will be resolved by updates in the emulation, or just by using the other graphics card. But the interesting thing I'm seeing is that when it does dip into the 40s, it doesn't actually stutter like crazy like it used to. So I guess that's something that happens with certain hardware that emulation doesn't like, it just stutters. And with this now last-gen Intel hardware, it appears to be completely fine. Like, the frame rate will dip, but it won't stutter and go and wee. And, you know, I'd say that's a massive improvement. It's a shame, because the 2500K I actually had a really good experience with emulation before it decided to eat itself. Bye.
Almost there, emulator.
Yeah, I'm not seeing too many frame dips. Or at least I'm not seeing any stuttering. The only stuttering I'm seeing in this seems to have to do with the emulation. Wake up. Ah, power management kicked in.
Heavens, what's that? 007, you must eliminate those helicopters if we are to make a safe extraction.
Yeah, it's making it through without too many issues. That's good to see. This is the main game I've been testing with, is Nightfire, because it seems to present problems. Now, the one other game that I've seen have issues is Simpsons Hit and Run. So I'm going to test that too. I never tested it on the old hardware, but it would be nice to know if it works on the new stuff. Is there another helicopter I'm missing? Ah, snowmobile.
Welcome aboard, 007.
Yeah, I'm perfectly happy with this performance. I made it through the first 3 or 4 levels of Nightfire without any issues at all. Just emulation issues more than anything else. Now, the other game that has a problem usually is Simpsons Hit and Run, so we will give that a shot as well. I think it'll be fine, unless the emulator itself just can't seem to handle it. I don't know. We'll have to see. I tried Road Rage on, I think, my gaming PC, and that ran fine. But this I've seen run like crap on online, where people tested on something like Intel graphics. But this is AMD graphics, so it should be fine. I love those little newspaper articles. Well, so far this is running fine. I haven't seen any problems through the intro scene or anything like that. So now we're getting into the actual game. this is running beautifully. So let's just try driving around and see what happens. Oh, yeah. So this isn't struggling to run at all. It runs fine. So, excellent. I'm liking what I see so far. I'm not seeing any, like, super particle-y... Yeah, I'm not seeing anything crazy.
Oh my god.
Yeah, this game runs fine. I'm not seeing any instances where it's gotten really bad. Yeah, so far that's fine, so let's try something else. Let's try Tony Hawk, since this is one of the main things I like to emulate. Now, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater is my favorite game franchise, so I know it like the back of my hand. I'll know if something's wrong. Like that purple line up there, what's that all about? That's got to be an emulation problem or something to do with the graphics, because once you get to the menu here, it's fine. The one thing I'm going to have to be careful with is the music in this game, so I'm going to have to shut it off, just so I don't get hit with copyright or something. No, 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 be quiet! Oh, this is beautiful. No problems at all. Oh, damn, I'm so good at skateboarding. I'm not used to the D-pad on this Xbox controller at all. It's an Xbox 360 D-pad, so it's not amazing. There we go. Now I did something cool. Ooh, I did a 900. Hell yeah. Yeah, so this system is so much better than the old one. It's easily my best emulation system. It's even better than my Ryzen stuff. So I'm going to say that the internet was definitely right about Intel sort of being where it's at for emulation systems. This is the one use case I can think of where you actually want to buy an Intel processor right now. Which is kind of hilarious when you think about it. If you want to get the highest, if you're a frame chaser, or you want to emulate stuff, that's sort of the only two instances. If you're a frame chasing snob, or if you want to emulate, those are the two instances where Intel seems to be useful right now. And I didn't even go high end; I went mid range on this one. So, you know, it kind of is what it is. I mean, it's not that AMD stuff won't emulate this just fine. It will, but it's not going to be nearly this consistent. Which is honestly surprising me, because AMD has had some really good IPC improvements over the years, and I guess there's just something about emulation that likes Intel, and I'm thinking that's just its affinity for high frequency. It really likes high frequency. So there must be, I don't know if there's an IPC advantage there somewhere or what, but it seems to really, really favor Intel for whatever reason. And that's fine. I got a good deal on this system and it does exactly what I wanted it to, so I couldn't be happier. Alright, I gotta stop playing or I'm gonna get sucked into that. Yeah, I think that's really it. That basically shows what this is capable of. And I wasn't expecting that much of an improvement. And honestly, I got a lot more than I expected. This is a much more consistently running system for emulation than the AMD stuff I have, or even the 2500K. And the 2500K I had the best experience with before it decided to give me issues. So there you go. This system's doing what it's designed for, and it will probably do more than what it's designed for with those 2 extra cores. So I'd say that's a job well done. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I certainly did. I haven't put together an Intel system in a while, so it's kind of nice to see how the other half lives every now and then. And it goes to show that you shouldn't fanboy over one brand, even if they're the underdog. Sometimes, even if they're the underdog right now, which happens to be Intel, sometimes there can be weird use cases where using Intel is actually better, and emulation seems to be it, at least as far as Dolphin is concerned. It really likes Intel. It really likes high frequency. It doesn't really care about core count. Other emulators do, but this one doesn't. And it's overall doing a fantastic job. So for emulation, I would say you want to go Intel for the CPU and AMD for the GPU. That is the best experience I've had as far as Dolphin is concerned, and seems to be fine across the board with other emulators as well that I've used. So there you have it. The issues that I had with NVIDIA and Intel with Dolphin have to do with some of the FMV video sequences where you get these weird lines in the video, and it looks bizarre. It happens on my 2060, and it happens on anything with Intel graphics in it. AMD is the way to go for emulation, I would say. And emulation doesn't require a whole lot of GPU power. It relies a lot more on CPU. So that's why I made the platform change and kept the same GPU, and things improved anyway. So there you have it. If you want to reach me on social media, those links are down below. And if you'd like to join our Discord community, that link is down below as well. And with that, I'm going to end the video. So have a good one, everybody. Ciao.